my assigned chores growing up as a junior in high school. It was the summer between my junior and senior year. One of my assigned jobs was to mow the lawn. So there wasn't anything new about me mowing the lawn in August. But one of my assigned jobs was not getting the mail. So I don't know what it was that got into me that I went and probably for the first time ever got the mail. And in the mailbox was the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City version of the Texas Catholic. It's called the Sooner Catholic. And so I took a look, and it had a picture of a priest with, sometimes it's called a 1,000-yard stare, where they just look like they're looking into eternity. And there was a one-word headline, and that one-word headline was martyred. And so this would have been August, again, of '81. Father Rother was killed July 28th of 1981 in the rectory in Guatemala. And I think I was done mowing the lawn because I know I walked in and I read the article. And I had never, I always gone to all the things my parents asked me to go to, certainly all the time that, all 10 or 12 of the Catholic high school kids in my parish, very small town, whenever we got together to play softball, something, I always went to those things. But that was the first time that I really saw the church as something bigger than St. Mary Parish in Ardmore, Oklahoma. And what really struck me was, when you're 17 years old, you think everything that has to do with the church is beyond ancient. It's okay, we know. Because you think St. Peter, you think all those that were ever eyewitnesses to Jesus lived a long time ago, and the prophets lived a long time before that, so it gets fairly distant. But what I was directly confronted with at that point is that this was a man from this state that I was growing up in. I wasn't born in Oklahoma, but he was. He was born in 1935. And that began, a time that, the life of Stanley Rother would move in and out of my own. So I became aware that, the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City was bigger than St. Mary's Parish in Ardmore, Oklahoma. So a few months later, I was somewhere between asked and voluntold to be the youth representative from my region of the state. And that really began a process of becoming aware of the works of the church at that time. The Archdiocese of Oklahoma City was a very mission-oriented place. And if you're a priest coming up the ranks in Oklahoma City, you might get the benefit of a year or two of being a parochial vicar at a parish in Oklahoma City. But as soon as that honeymoon is over, you're being sent to Altus, the panhandle of Oklahoma, where you will probably have your assigned parish but another 2 or 3 missions. It's nothing for priests in Oklahoma to put 300 or 400 miles on the car every weekend, just getting to the places that they're asked to offer Mass. But mission goes far beyond that. It goes into all of the pastoral priorities, that are always on the shoulders of the bishop. So if I had an avocation/vocation at that period of my life, it was to be a terrific lifeguard. So I was a trainer of lifeguards, at that point, and it became known to me that the camp for the Archdiocese of Oklahoma took place at Lake Murray, which is right beside Ardmore, where I grew up, and they were without a lifeguard. So my parents, being good people, they let me know that I would not be going to the summer job that I had lined up, that I was going to be the lifeguard for the summer. And part of what I learned during that time is I was lifeguarding scads and scads of Rother nephews. And there was a counselor on the camp who was a second cousin to Father Don. And my roommate during that summer of lifeguarding, when he came down to cover masses, was the youth director / vocations director, for the Diocese of Dallas. So not a big surprise as I look back, but a year later, I entered seminary. But, I have to admit, one of the things that I found shocking, when I got to the seminary was most of the other seminarians came from urban places, much more Catholic places. I went to Columbus, Ohio, for seminary. So you had Cleveland and Cincinnati, big archdioceses that had 100-year-old parishes, and they weren't nearly as familiar with literally mission territory. And Oklahoma, I entered seminary in 1982. I'm doing my math rapidly. That's just 75 years after Oklahoma became a state. Before that, it was called Indian Territory. And so I came in with a very mission kind of bent, and I wonder that perhaps one of the reasons I didn't finish was I just wanted to be left alone to pursue my mission. So that's why things like this are so very special for me. So we're going to cover a little bit about the logistics of the day. So next Saturday, depart here 7 a.m. We'll get back here around 6 p.m.
It's just too small.
Okay. I'm gonna see if I can.
Yeah.
So, but then throughout the day, I had the opportunity to make my first visit to the Rother Shrine last June. So there is plenty to see around. Please wear comfortable shoes. One of the things that they built is they kind of blended cultures and devotions is in Mexico City. And the opportunity to do this last October, to go to the place that Juan Diego, was visited by the Blessed Virgin Mary, and that is called Tepeyac Hill. And so they built kind of a replica of Tepeyac Hill, at the Rother Shrine. So if you're inclined to go on a fairly gentle climb, it's not nearly as high or steep as the hill in Mexico City. Wear comfortable shoes. It's steep enough that heels probably wouldn't go over well. So, but 10:30, museum and guided tour. Confessions start, if interested, at 11:30, mass at 12:15. And then from 1 to 2:30, you'll have about an hour and a half to explore. That'd probably be the time if you wanted to climb Tepeyac Hill. That would be the optimal time to do that. So Pope Francis proclaimed 2025 as Pilgrims of Hope. So every 25 years, in the church, we have a jubilee that goes all the way back to biblical times, and it's a time of release. It's a time that people work at reconciliation. It's a time that people want to get off their shoulders everything that's weighing them down. And in biblical times, it touched every part of life, so all debts were forgiven. Basically, it's a complete reset every 25 years. And so, that's part of the mindset to enter as we go into a jubilee. So I'm going to read this a little bit. I'm going to see if I can expand this a tiny bit. Okay. So it goes back to the biblical times, profound period of grace, reconciliation, and renewal. Invites us to deepen our spiritual life through prayer, acts of charity, and pilgrimage. So part of the essence of pilgrimage is you leave your comfort zone. You can't do a pilgrimage on the couch. But you go someplace, and you encounter new things that take you out of yourself. So again, this year, Pope Francis named this Pilgrims of Hope. And as noted here, hope never disappoints. So this shrine in Oklahoma City has been designated a Jubilee site. So in the Diocese of Dallas, I know there are 4 parishes that have been designated Jubilee sites. And the notion is to visit one of those sites, but you can go to anybody's site. As part of the Jubilee year of the church, the Vatican put some documents out, and, they named the churches in Rome that are Jubilee sites there, and they have special doors, and, that's a wonderful thing, but as we all know, we can do enough of a pilgrimage to get out off the couch, but we can't all jump on a plane and go to Rome for that pilgrimage. So for the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City, they have designated the Rother Shrine to be one of the designated Jubilee sites. And of course, one of the words that we hear, or 4 words we hear in the church: 1, Holy Catholic Apostolic. If the Archdiocese proclaims a site to be a Jubilee site, it's not just for their people. We from Texas can go up, and it's a Jubilee site as much for us as it is for anybody residing in Oklahoma. You might hear or read about something called an indulgence, or a plenary indulgence. The 2 key things to know about that: number 1, this is kind of before the 2 things. One of the things that was probably a flashpoint in the Reformation is the church, admittedly, I think, got into a little bit of trouble, with the buying and selling of indulgences and all that. And so, they are purely spiritual practices now. But the notion of an indulgence is if we do 2 things. If we take the prescribed steps, that's the easy part. So this prescribed steps here is going to Mass, receiving the sacraments, particularly reconciliation, engaging in acts of charity, and making a visit to one of the designated sites. So that's if you're checklist oriented, those are kind of the checklists. But the number 2 there is we also need to open our hearts in a particular way to receive that grace. One of the best images that comes to me about our relationship with God is the only way that we can receive the gifts God wants to give us is if we empty our hands. If our hands are filled with other things, other worries, the busyness of life, then we're holding on to our treasure. But if we want the gifts that He wants us to have, at least for some of the time, ideally some time every day, we've got to let everything else go from our hands so that He can give us the gifts that He has patiently waited to give to us. So that's part of what a trip like this is all about. So, Blessed Stanley, I mentioned the 1,000-yard stare. This is the 1,000-yard stare. So this was the picture that was on the front page of the Sooner Catholic that I took out of that mailbox after mowing the lawn. And so we'll cover some more about his dates, but he was beatified on September 23rd, 2017. I got a special indulgence from the diaconal formation team. I asked for permission to not have to be at the prescribed activity that day so that I could go up to the beatification. And I went up on my own, and in a way, I'm glad I did, because that's the only way I got a seat. I went into the arena about 3 hours before it was supposed to start, and the only seats that were left were singles. I think they planned for about 10,000. They had over 20,000 people. They estimated they had another 20,000 people outside. So whoever decided they didn't need the biggest arena in Oklahoma City where their colors are blue. The Thunder, where the Oklahoma, they didn't get that arena. They went to the one, and I think everybody in hindsight desperately wishes that they had gone to the bigger arena. So I was very fortunate to have been there for his beatification. It wasn't too long before that, as suggested, December 1st, 2016, is within the cause for canonization. Pope Francis signed the decree that Father Rother was a martyr of the church. And as a martyr of the church, that opened the path for him to become beatified. From that point forward, you're known as Blessed Stanley Rother. So that's why he is now blessed. I'm going to play something really quick. And this is just a little bit of an introduction about, I'm going to aim this pretty well. All right, bear with me. I'm going to do it the old-fashioned way. I guess I can't do something like this when I'm... So this is from good old Franciscan Media Saint of the Day. So something I learned is you don't have to be a saint to be part of Saint of the Day.
This is Franciscan Media's Saint of the Day for July 28th. Today we celebrate Blessed Stanley Rother. Born into an Oklahoma farming family, Stanley Francis Rother was ordained to the priesthood in 1963. Accepting the Oklahoma City Diocese invitation to join its mission staff in Guatemala, Father Rother served the parish at Santiago Atitlan for 13 years, experimenting with various farm crops in addition to his pastoral duties. During Guatemala's Civil War, the Catholic Church's insistence on catechizing and educating the poor put many non-combatants in danger. Early in 1981, with his own name on a death list, Father Rother visited family and friends in Oklahoma. Against their advice and that of the local bishop, he chose to return to Atitlan to be with his people. The shepherd cannot run at the first sign of danger, he told those he left in the States. In the early morning hours of July 28, 3 men entered the rectory and fought with Father Rother before executing him. His beloved parishioners mourned. "They have killed our priest." Declared the first American-born martyr for the faith in 2016, Stanley Rother also became the first American-born man to be beatified on September 23, 2017. There's more about the saints, along with inspiration and Catholic resources at our website, saintoftheday.org. From Franciscan Media, this has been Saint of the Day.
A little snippet. We've got a longer video that I'll share with you toward the end here that gives you a really, really good glimpse into Father Stanley's life. And so we move on, just a couple of pictures. This is the on the left is the 1,000 words, or 1,000 yards there. So that's this one. And the one in color, I thought you might like to see, kind of as they say, in living color, a little bit of a better view of that. That stole would be one that would have been made by the women of that village using the native weave that they have. So if anyone here has ever had me lead Stations of the Cross, for instance, I have a set of 5 stoles that were made in that village of the same type of weave. They're very colorful. So the one I would do for Stations of the Cross would be purple, but all of the symbology on there, are sacred images of the church that over time Father Stanley and others had taught to the women there. When this mission in this particular parish arrived, there hadn't been a practicing parish there for hundreds of years, because Central America was colonized by Spain, and colonization brought with it a lot of conversion by the sword, and so it kind of went back and forth and back and forth. And so this village, when this group of missionaries came, had largely been vacant, for a considerable period of time. And then this is a picture that's always, very, very special to me. We're back in black and white, obviously, but this would have been Father Stan, just standing anywhere near the mission, but he was talking to this little girl, and he cared deeply about everyone. The special part of this is before his beatification, a team was sent to Guatemala a team was sent from Oklahoma to Guatemala to find this girl. who would then have been a grown woman. And they did find her. And this woman was able to come up and be part of the beatification. This little girl, later grown woman, had no idea that this picture had been just an iconic picture in the Archdiocese of Oklahoma to capture the life of Father Stan. So I mean, it's interesting to just think, if you're a little girl, might have a foggy memory of talking to the very, very tall Father Stan. I mean, he probably towered 1.5 feet over just about all of the other people in the village. But this is a quote that was from Father Stan, and he sent it in a letter to a friend, but they'll read it. I got a cramp in my back from the anger I felt that this friend was being taken off to be tortured for a day or two and then brutally murdered for wanting nothing more than better conditions for his people. So he was talking about a man that, it's a very agricultural society there. And I think, as it said, he asked for another penny for the crop that he was bringing to market. And so what would happen really with any challenge to the powerful there is these people would disappear. And this was very known to Father Stan, that people would just be abducted, and then terrible things would happen, and then they'd be dumped, usually one of two places. They'd be dumped in a place where they would be found, or they would be dumped into a water well to poison the well, as a warning to everyone else. So Father Stan, he was there for a pretty significant period of time, but really from about his halfway mark, the trouble started, and it just became more and more and more violent the entire time. So one of the things that he wrote in a letter to the people of Oklahoma is, a shepherd cannot run at the first sign of danger. And so he had been warned that he was on some hit lists, and that progressed to the point where he's being told, you're not on the hit list, you're not on the hit list, you're on the death list, and you're at the very top of the death list. And another quote that he wrote, if it is my destiny that I should give my life here, then so be it. And he wrote that in 1981 as he was discerning whether he should return, because he was presented with very factual information that he was near the top of the death list. And he'd said that if I ever felt that I was an indirect threat, I'll return home. But if I return home, it wasn't, I'm out of here. It's, I'm gonna leave, I'm gonna see if things settle down, I'm gonna seek counsel. And I'm gonna send all of you some things to look through. But one of them is a wonderful video that was put together by someone at the seminary where he finished. One of the places that Father Stan went after he fled Guatemala in early 1981 is he returned to the seminary in Emmitsburg, Maryland, where he finished his studies. And he went there for a week, and explain this in a bit. Father Stan was not a particularly good seminarian in one particular dimension, academics. He grew up on a farm, and as you'll learn, he could fix anything, could grow anything. So one of the things that he was always attracted toward in the seminary is if there was any building project, repair project in one place, they thought they wanted to build a grotto. So he built a grotto, but that came at the cost of what? His studies. And so, but he went back to that grotto that had become so special to him. And it's thought that it was there that he concluded that I have to go back. And so he made it back to his village in time to celebrate Holy Week. And so we had from April-ish of that year, he had May, June, and most of July. But then he was killed at the end of July. And so we're going to play now, get a little comfortable. This runs about 20 minutes, but it'll give you a terrific idea of his life.
Dear Archbishop, since the 1st of May, 1980,
I have a quick question too.
priests killed here in the country.
I know they're planning a video at the site. Do you know if this is the same?
I'm pretty sure it would not be the same,
Oh,
but I'm curious about why this. I'm gonna see if I can.
Probably open another window.
I'm gonna close all of the windows. Okay.
At one place, there were about 60 men in the church lined up by the wall, and they killed every 4th person. The country here is in rebellion, and the government is taking it out on the church.
3 men walked into the rectory in the middle of the night, and then they found a young man that was staying in the rectory. With the threat of the gun, he took them and said, "Father, they've come for you." You could see it in the knuckles of his hand. He had protected himself from the blows, but they shot him 2 times.
If it is my destiny that I should give my life here, then so be it. The shepherd cannot run at the first sign of danger. Sincerely in Christ Jesus, Stanley Rother.
He had the courage to be whatever God called him to be, no matter what that meant. And that's why he is such a perfect saint for us in our day. He was an ordinary person from a small town farming family.
He was born during the Depression. I'm sure he was formed from what it took to make a farm go in Oklahoma during the Dust Bowl.
When we come home from school, you walk after the cows, you bring them up, and then you milk them, separate the milk, stuff like that. By that time, it's supper time.
Immediately after supper, we pulled a chair out and knelt down by her chair, said the rosary. That's what I remember. We were taught religion in school. We were quizzed on it every night by our parents, especially Mother. We knew most everybody in the class because they were either related or neighbors. We made out pretty quickly. We don't tell on each other when we get home.
Everybody knows everybody and work together, but I think that was essential in developing the ethics that this is what we're called to be as Christian and what we're called to do as servants of one another. I think all of that comes from being in that kind of community and atmosphere. And so when everybody expected Stanley to say, "I'm going to stay here and be a farmer," and he said, "I'm going to the seminary," that's big.
There's so much to learn in this short time. My grades are not the best, but that doesn't mean that I didn't learn much this summer.
His life in the seminary, he was always doing a project.
There were all kinds of things in the seminary that he was perfectly comfortable with. Studying was not one of those things.
He was putting forth the effort, but books were in Latin, and he didn't know Latin. And just was too much for him.
To Took final test in Latin 13 and probably failed. I'm pretty disgusted and wish I could quit now.
When he was asked to leave, it was certainly a judgment on his academics. I don't think for him, it was a judgment on his character.
He was confident in the call to the priesthood. So much so that when he failed, he said, I still feel called to be a priest. That's gutsy. After you're sent home and told that you really should consider a different vocation, to say, no, I still feel very called to the priesthood. And then the bishop, with his generous response of saying, I will find you a seminary.
Father Rother was ordained in 1963, about the time that the Oklahoma mission was getting started in Guatemala. And within 5 years, he had volunteered and was off to Guatemala.
The people themselves are quite exceptional. There's great poverty. The normal income for many families is $50 a year. Their main staple is corn, grown on a little plot, maybe as much as a 3 or 4 hour walk from their home.
When he came there, a large proportion of the population suffered from malnutrition. Infant mortality was approximately half of the children died before age 6. The Oklahoma missionaries before him and then him when he arrived in 1968 were dealing with a situation of great human need. So when he got to Guatemala, he has to make things work in this village that's cut off from the rest of the world. For him, that's the place where he can make a difference and a place where his life is going to intersect everybody's life.
Padre Francisco demostró el amor de Dios, que no solamente es predicar, decir, sino que también es hacer, a trabajar en muchas formas cómo ayudar directamente a la población.
He was able to establish co-ops to make it more profitable for the small farmer. He was part of opening a radio station, a school, then a hospital. One of the most meaningful projects that he worked on was translating the New Testament to their language so that they could hear the gospel proclaimed in their own language. That's huge.
He put his whole being into it, put his whole heart into it. And that obviously became apparent when things began to change.
The country here is in rebellion, and the government is taking it out on the church. The low wages that are paid, the very few who are excessively rich, the bad distribution of the land, these are some of the reasons for widespread discontent. The church seems to be the only force that's trying to do something about the situation, and therefore the government is after us.
In the context of Guatemala, the ruling class would begin to characterize those who worked with the poor as being communist sympathizers. And with that, the church began to become a target of persecution. The violence didn't come to Santiago until really 1980.
The army has moved into the town, and they have a town meeting stating that they were there to protect the people, to keep them from insurgents. And Father Stanley was listening to him politely, and then as soon as he said the word protect, his hand shoots up and he says, if you're here to protect, why are my people disappearing? That wasn't happening before you arrived here.
The tactic of the government has been to kidnap those they think are leaders, torture them, and kill them. We had just witnessed the kidnapping of someone we had gotten to know and love, and were unable to do anything about it. They had his mouth covered, but I could still hear his muffled screams for help.
For him, it was always about being their shepherd, being their pastor. And I think he struggled with how to minister to them in that violence.
He provided food for widows and children of those who'd been kidnapped. He allowed young people to spend the night in the church building seeking refuge from the military. He looked for the bodies of those who were missing. He simply tried to be a shepherd for his flock, and the wolf was attacking from all sorts of directions.
At the first signs of danger, the shepherd can't run and leave the sheep fend for themselves. I've invested too much of my life here to run.
I think the more threatening things became, the more resolute he would become. That was in his nature. He may have been soft-spoken, but underneath his quiet nature was steel. Of course, when he heard that he was on the death list, I mean, he certainly took that seriously.
I think once his name was on a death list, and he saw that his associate pastor was also on the death list, that's when he came back to Oklahoma.
After working there for 12 and a half years, I feel almost like a Guatemalan, and I still want to return. The big question is, should I take a chance and go back? Nobody has yet convinced me to stay here.
He spent a lot of time standing at that west door there, gazing out that west door, just staring, you know, and he wanted to go back so bad.
He knew he could probably be assigned a nice, comfortable parish in Oklahoma and live out his priestly life in a much more conventional way. But he had given his heart, to his people.
He belonged back with the people. When he was removed from them by coming back here, he felt that he had abandoned them, and in a sense he did. The shepherd should not run. And that's what he was telling me. And I could hear him, I could see him, and I agreed, yes, you're correct, go back. I did not think I was sending him to death. I didn't probably realize how fearful he was because he was so intent on going back. But he had to be fearful because he knew what was happening.
He would describe that if I'm ever kidnapped, they'll never get me out of the rectory alive. It was really chilling to know that those were the things that he dealt with every day.
It had to have been a difficult decision, and yet on the other hand not, because he was so confident in God's providence. Everyone acknowledged he knew he needed to go back.
Stanley's life was that parish and those people in that situation. And so being cut off from that parish was, that was killing for him. Again, if he'd stayed behind in Oklahoma where it was safe and watched from a distance while those people suffered, that would have been a life less for him than to go back and do what he needed to do to remain their shepherd. He didn't go back to Guatemala to die. He went back to Guatemala to live.
He himself said, I promised them I would be back for Holy Week. And that's what he did.
Going for Holy Week, that had to have been a really powerful experience for him. And the fact that his return was precisely at that time, I just have to think that he must have really identified with Jesus.
When he came back, it had to have had a tremendous impact upon them. Just in terms of giving them courage, giving them confidence, as they were confronting their own fears and dangers, to know that they were not confronting them alone, that their shepherd was in their midst. He would give his all, as Christ gave his all, and that even after Father Stan had suffered martyrdom, they had to have confidence that the Lord was still with them.
On July 1st, an Italian Franciscan from the eastern part of the country was shot while returning to the rectory after a mass in the rural area. That makes 6 priests killed outright and 2 kidnapped since May 1st of 1980. Keep us in your prayers.
He did what was needed to secure the parish property. He changed the locks. He began to sleep in a different room. And he also thought through what he would do, and then if they came for him.
On the night of July 27th, he actually celebrated Mass, and then he had a dinner. They listened to music, they laughed a lot. He tried to bring a little joy to the tension. And he excused himself and he went to the room where he had been sleeping. In the middle of the night, 3 men walked into the rectory.
himself. He was cut. While still alive, you can see the blood splatters on the wall.
When the sisters and his friend who were staying there heard the shots, they came running. The men had already run out, and he was already dead. They started collecting his blood and put it in these jars. And that was one of the jars that was on the altar later. They knew that it was martyrdom from the beginning. As the word of his death traveled, hundreds and hundreds just showed up at the church. The murmur of the people sitting there was, they killed our priest. Mataron nuestro pastor, our shepherd.
It was thousands of people there in that little square looking up. What a sight that must have been.
Father Rother had told one of the sisters that if they come for me, light the Easter candle and sing Easter songs. And that's what they did. And got people to turn to their faith as the lens through which to view what they were dealing with.
Second century Tertullian said that the blood of martyrs is the seed of Christians. When Christians die for their faith, it can be expected to bring about a renewal of faith in others. And it's been a tremendous renewal of the church.
The parish was founded in 1547. There was not a single location of the priesthood in that parish in over 400 years. Since 1981, there have been 9 priests ordained from that one parish, and they've got another 7 in the seminary right now. Right there is a powerful measure how his blood was the seed of faith.
Stanley's commitment has such an impact on everybody because it invites us into what a life in Christ is supposed to mean.
The beatification of Stanley Rother is of tremendous importance to all of us who are the body of Christ. It was like a true nugget of what it means to be a Catholic.
Today was spiritual. I felt like he was there with us.
And I'm especially happy about this, a farmer from Oklahoma, and we farm. That's very, very special. We've had a big celebration today.
I'm from Guatemala, and I was born in Santiago Atitlan. I used to work with Father Stanley Rother. I'm so happy to be here.
All of us could come together from Vietnam, from Mexico, from Central America, from different experiences, and could together celebrate this example that transcends the limitations of our language and the different places where we come from and the different places where we are.
Part of heaven touched earth, and earth touched a part of heaven. Because, I mean, there were thousands of people who were honoring the life of a man who had the courage to give his life for his sheep.
The Lord is raising up something from within our local community. It's a great source of encouragement for the church in Oklahoma.
And so to think that one of our own can rise up to that level in the church, it's going to inspire faith like we've never seen.
To see his witness and the gift of his life for the people he loved, just that encouraged me because give myself more fully to the people I serve.
All of us are called to become saints. And so we really do need real life flesh and blood, men and women who responded to that call and shows us what a life of holiness really looks like.
It's essential to emphasize how ordinary he was, because we are all called to holiness, and he responded with his whole being. He is the first American martyr. He is also our example of what it means to live, what we're called to live every day. The fact that a regular guy from a small town can hear God's call and say yes until it called for his martyrdom. We're not all called to be martyrs, but we are all called to answer that yes.
And isn't that the story for all of us? Isn't that what sanctity and sainthood is supposed to be?
So, a guide to a couple of people. These are all direct memories of mine. The priest who said he didn't go back to Guatemala to die. He went back to Guatemala to live. He was the brother of the camp counselor. So they were both second cousins. And Father Rother went back. Part of what brought Father Rother back to Oklahoma that last trip was Father Don Wolf's ordination. And so it's said in the video that Father Don Wolf was at St. Eugene Parish. He is no longer there. He is now the rector of the shrine. So his entire life has been there. There was the priest that was talking about vocations. When I first met him, he was the rather young Father Tony Taylor, pastor of Queen of All Saints in Sayre, Oklahoma. He is now Bishop Anthony Taylor of Little Rock, Arkansas. But he was my pre-sponsor for entering seminary. And so I see faces of a lot of people. You know, there was a soft-spoken priest at the end that was a high school classmate of mine. As I was leaving seminary, he was entering. So, yeah, this is almost a bit of a reunion. I'll leave you with two last things. Number one, as I mentioned, a man of our time and place. So, obviously, Oklahoma City, or Oklahoma, is not terribly far from you. Drive north an hour and you're there. But when he was ordained, the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City and the Diocese of Tulsa were simply the Archdiocese of Oklahoma. And so priests could be sent anywhere in the state. So because of his unique talents of fixing things, all Catholic facilities in Durant, Oklahoma were in terrible condition. So after ordination, he was assigned to Durant. Yes, we want you there for this, but there were two things. There were the facilities in Durant, but there was also a property on Lake Texoma that the bishop needed a lot of work done on. And so even after ordination, Mother Church still relied on the mechanic part and farmer part. And so Durant, Oklahoma, if you don't know where that is an hour up Central Expressway. So we are about an hour from where Blessed Stanley Rother served. And something that I've shared with a lot of seminarians, I've shared this with many who have an idea of what they want to do in life, but they too struggle with academics. Father Rother initially went to seminary in San Antonio and they dismissed him. So he came back, but much to the credit of Archbishop Reed, he still saw an authentic vocation in this man and told him, I will find you a place where you can complete your studies, because he had that much faith in him. But the real turn in the story is this man who got dismissed from seminary because he could not learn Latin, translated not just the Gospels, as was mentioned, but translated the entire New Testament into Tutuil. And so there aren't many, terrible with this. St. Jerome is one of the earliest biblical scholars. And the church reveres anyone who faithfully translates the Word of God into other languages. And here's this misfit from, not just Oklahoma, but nowhere Oklahoma. You don't get much less substantial than Okarche, Oklahoma. And so God indeed works in the most mysterious and blessed of ways. So happy to field any questions. I think there's a different video you see, but just in case you see it again, I promise you'll enjoy it again.
I thought that just to add to the pilgrimage, that I think is interesting is that the church we're going to see, from what I read, is like a replica of the church he ministered in Guatemala. So it's beautiful and it's added to the architecture.
So you mentioned he's already blessed. So has there been, or how many miracles have been?
None.
None yet.
But the rule is that for a martyr, typically for a saint, you need 2 miracles. For a martyr, you only need 1. So he is 1 miracle away. And, I think in so many ways, my life has unfolded in the way it should, because, one of the things that Father Bass has realized for me, of me, is that, he's good enough a guy. He's always out doing things. I've actually, I think you might have heard me say in a homily once that we have a shepherd. Father Bass leads from the front. Deacons lead from the middle of the pack sometimes, but mostly we lead from the back. Looking for those that are stuck, looking for those that are falling behind. And so I referenced that, look at Deacon Coy and me as sheepdogs. That's our role. But I've taken that one step further with Father Bass and told him, I'm afraid I have to inform you that the truth of this sheepdog is I'm an outside dog. So I'm not at my best in conference rooms and I'm certainly not leading blue ribbon committees. I'm typically out there. So after this, I spend every Sunday afternoon at Baylor in McKinney. So I've been in position many times to tell gravely sick people that are looking for something to hold on to. I have in my bag cards with the prayer for canonization of Father Rother. So I said, give your intention. Ask Blessed Stan to intercede for you, because wouldn't it be a profound thing if you could both share a miracle? You as a patient need a miracle. Father Stan needs a miracle. And blessed is the person who will share that canonizing miracle with him. So very, very special guy. And we all have our heroes in the church. We have people that we look up to, that their names are profoundly professed in the Gospels, and we've come to know them so well. But it really is a profound thing, especially for our young, that we just canonized 2 young men that lived during the lifetimes of them, but anybody in the room that was born before 1981, certainly includes me. You know, we lived in the same time as Father Stan. Any other questions? I'll leave you with one thing, something kind of beautiful about the Spanish language is, in English we have two words. A pastor is the guy that runs a church, and the shepherd is the one that chases after sheep. In Spanish, the word is the same, pastor. It's the same word for both. And so, everybody got it right when they attributed to Father Stan the heart of a pastor. So all good?
Thank you, Deacon.
I hope you enjoyed the talk.
Yes.